All right, so this is a Vice video on the rise of far-right female influencers. And I saw somebody's comment earlier where they were saying that I could be a great far-right influencer if I did not have a soul. And that is true. But I have always said, you know, if ever I decide to change things up and I go, you know what? I'm not getting my bag doing what I'm doing here. I'm gonna switch tunes and be a far-right female influencer. You never know. It could happen.
Traditionally, the far right has been a male-dominated and often openly misogynistic space.
Feminism is cancer. Thank you very much.
Oh, Milo.
But in recent years, at least on the surface, something has changed. Across the world, women have emerged as key figures in far-right movements, playing a central role in softening the image and broadening the appeal of extremist politics.
I actually feel like I'm getting to a point where I joke about being a far-right influencer, that people are going to think it's serious in the way that people think Hassan is an LGBTQIA foe. People at this point think that Hassan is a homophobic asshole. And they're going to start thinking that, like, I want to be a far-right female influencer. That's why they call us conservatives. That's true. Is this dumb people propaganda? Well, you didn't even spell propaganda right, so I'd go back and fix that before anything else.
They are absolutely crucial to spreading the ideology, but they are also crucial to spreading the ideology with a smile and making it seem palatable.
It was women that got Trump elected. And I guess to be really edgy, it was also women that got Hitler elected.
Across the US and Europe, a new generation of female social media personalities are emerging as figureheads of far-right movements. In Italy, the far-right politician Giorgia Meloni has just made history.
Tonight, Italy is preparing for its first ever female prime minister.
In France, Marine Le Pen, head of the far-right National Rally, has established herself as the leading rival to President Emmanuel Macron.
Le Pen is known for her far-right stances like restricting immigration and banning Muslim women from wearing headscarves in public.
Have women actually become a secret weapon for the far right?
_Z1312.
Thank you, dude. What?
Women on the far right have emerged as major social media presences, becoming leading influencers of the radical right. Lana Lockteff made her name spreading racist and anti-Semitic conspiracy theories through the white supremacist media channel she runs with her husband.
Let me run through a few other European classics coming out that replace the main white character.
Lockteff has been clear about the unique roles she believes women should and should not play within far-right movements.
Although I think women are too emotional for leading roles in politics, this is the time for female nationalists to be loud. Why? Men. Women have a special power to inspire and motivate men.
If this, traditionally attractive woman with blonde hair and, a red lip, it somehow it's supposed to seem less odious when they talk about, white superiority, but it's about putting a certain veneer. It's also absolutely about recruitment.
Yes, it's certainly true that the presence of women kind of humanizes and also almost justifies a movement.
Yeah, it makes it softer to hear. It's easier for people to hear a hard message when it's a soft, good-looking woman saying it. It's just
showing the ways in which, there's actually more familiarity, more similarity. Between what the far right believes and what mainstream conservatives believe, I think is really crucial.
There's one key demographic in particular to whom female far-right influencers appear to have a special appeal, and that's other women.
The majority of white women voted for Trump, so I think the media is trying to spin it that, oh my God, all these women are feminists now. I think the majority are not feminists, and when you actually talk to women and say, well, what does that really mean? You find that the majority of them are actually quite traditional.
The irony is that Lockteff and other far-right influencers spend much of their time railing against the feminist movement that won women the right to a public political voice in the first place.
I think of women back then not being able to vote and having the whole one house, one vote thing. Why would you marry a man who wouldn't vote in your best interest or you wouldn't agree with politically to begin with?
They sort of position themselves, or they have this posture of, as a woman, I can speak to what feminism really is. Women.
Yeah, that part right there. Do you believe they agree that their efforts will actually cost them their rights, or that they think nothing will come of it and they're just getting the bag? It depends on who it is, but a lot of far-right female influencers will use women's rights in some ways, and then in other ways kind of ignore the fact that their platform and the movement that they're a part of is completely against women's rights. So for instance, a lot of these far-right female influencers will use women's rights to hit back on and be anti-migrant, anti-immigrant, xenophobic, just be super fucking racist, because they will they will spread the narrative that people like Donald Trump and other right-wingers love to spread, which is that immigrants and migrants are coming into your country and raping women and girls. And so female influencers have the advantage over men, where they go, I'm a woman and I am concerned for my safety. We talk all about sexual assault and wanting to protect women's bodies and women's rights. So if you let in all of these Mexicans, or you let in all of these Middle Easterners, et cetera, we are at risk of being sexually assaulted. This is the message that they are sending.
And who feel threatened by it, women who don't see a place for themselves. They think that feminism has made the world a worse place. They think that it is ultimately an anti-woman project. They also describe partnership and motherhood as political action, because when your whole project is about guaranteeing the future of whiteness, fulfilling all of that is a matter of politics.
Awesome. All right, that looks great. Now this is complete. You're done. You've got this cute ad-friendly makeup look.
Figures like the Canadian alt-right star, Lauren Southern, operate as independent, empowered entrepreneurs and consciously use the same social media strategies as other online influencers to build their following. Alongside the anti-feminist rhetoric from influencers has been the growth of an entire online subculture known as tradwives, who actively reject pursuing their own careers or independence in favor of raising families and submitting to their husbands.
Don't listen to this narrative of feminism that is killing white Western society. Don't buy into it.
The trad movement is this movement to celebrate women who are in traditional
thousands
roles.
check.
You are creating content that celebrates, that highlights how good the trad life is. It's making traditional gender roles seem appealing, seem cool, seem a part of the future. But if you really spend time with it, and you look at some of these, Instagram accounts or TikToks, what you'll realize is it's as much about what it's against as what it's for.
Thank you for not being ashamed to be traditional, to be Christian, to be conservative, and to be white.
I'm feminine, not feminist.
She really just said, thank you for not being afraid to be white. Thank you so much. You are so brave for being white. So brave.
Right? And so seeding these ideas that, you want to be like me. Look how great my life is. Children love me. Men love me. Look how celebrated I am in comparison to, right? You'll start to see the ways in which being trad is also about being anti something, not just pro-tradition, but anti-progress. No role could be more important in the far right than being someone who is willing to uphold a society of traditional gender roles and to have children and raise children within that society.
In Europe, two examples stand out of female politicians leading far-right parties to mainstream acceptance. In France, Marine Le Pen took over her father's far-right anti-immigration party in 2011 and immediately set about trying to soften its hardline image, taking it from the margins to become a major opposition party.
She's got that midsummer
Je
look.
contrôlerai l'immigration et rétablirai la sécurité pour tous.
Far-right movements and parties, first of all, are highly strategic, and secondly, are highly opportunistic. Women are essentially a tool to that end. Women are seen as having a better entree into that process of detoxification.
There will be in these immigrants terrorists.
Marine Le Pen is a very smart and adept politician. She wants to project racist ideas to potential voters, but she also sees that there's a boundary, and if she goes too far, that would start costing her voters instead of adding voters.
Le Pen has even tried to co-opt feminist arguments, pitching her anti-immigrant rhetoric as a defense of women's rights. On New Year's Eve 2015, large numbers of women were sexually assaulted by groups of male immigrants at celebrations in Cologne and other German cities. Far-right parties immediately seized on this to amplify panic about the so-called European migration crisis that year.
An estimated 1,700 right-wing demonstrators protested Germany's liberal immigration policy after more than 20 migrants were arrested for allegedly assaulting women on New Year's Eve.
Le Pen herself wrote an editorial claiming that immigration from Africa and the Middle East was a threat to women's rights in Europe.
The fact that Marine Le Pen uses women's rights
this is what they love to do
in some arenas and doesn't use women's rights in other arenas is a perfect example of how that's an opportunistic strategy. It's a tool to say, I want to attack ethnic minorities, I'm going to attack them using this tool.
In Italy, there's been a similar process of female-led detoxification.
Good night, Diggerson.
With Giorgia Meloni leading the far-right Brothers of Italy, which has roots in Italian fascism, to become the largest party in parliament.
Moi, je crois que Mussolini, c'était un bon politicien.
The 45-year-old firebrand insists she's no fascist, just a proud conservative and nationalist.
In fact, she
Girl
openly rails
bossing.
against modern feminism, instead championing so-called traditional family and gender roles, despite herself having faced the stigma of being an unwed mother.
Sí a la familia natural. No a los lobby LGBT.
Meloni's, like virtually all far-right politicians, extremely contradictory. Some parts of feminism work for her as a politician. At the same time, absolutely interested in using anti-LGBT, anti-women's rights, anti-welfare for immigrant rights rhetoric when it suits her. It's very important to realize that women are not politically a monolith.
So the other thing too is that whenever you have a woman in a position of power, right? Politician, CEO, et cetera, people on the far right will point to that and go, so when the topic of women being oppressed, the wage gap, women being unequal, and therefore we need to fight for feminism, et cetera, they will point to people like Giorgia Meloni, Marine Le Pen, figures on the American far right, and they will use that as examples of like women are just, they're girl bossing too, okay? Yeah, Margaret Thatcher, etc. Hillary Clinton gave a statement of support for Meloni, right? Who is a fucking Nazi. But it's very strategic as to putting women in these positions of power, particularly in politics. And that is one of the reasons, because they point to that and go, all these woke liberals want to say that there are barriers to women's equality, and women are they just don't have the same opportunities. It's like, hello, do these women not count? It's like, yeah, that Twitter meme, I do not support all women. Some of you bitches are very dumb. Yeah, that's that one.
Now or in history. We create our own peril by failing to understand how central women can be in the far right if we have blinders on that make us think that far right is a man's terrain and progressive politics is a women's terrain.
And guess what? Now we're pissed. And we have very good reason to be pissed. And I hope you're not twisting this for your liberal media.
Influencers use the platforms won for them by feminist pioneers to attack feminism itself. But as long as they keep pulling in votes and online clicks, no one on the far right is going to get too hung up on these hypocrisies.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I've seen with a lot of young far right female influencers who call themselves now anti-feminist because they believe that the version of feminism that woke liberals and us feminazis push forward is one that actually is not accepting of all women. And it's like, no, that's not true. I'm sure there are some women out there who believe that a woman choosing to stay at home and work is, they look down on that. When in reality, most women, most feminists believe that the power therein lies with a woman having a choice, with a woman having equal opportunities. So either, maybe she does decide to stay at home. She wants to be a mom. That's fucking fine. But then if she wants to, go off and have a career, she can have the same opportunities that men do. Point is, you get the choice if you want to stay at home. Yeah, and it's this. I mean, it's the same exact thing with abortion, right? It's all about having the choice. There's also only a tiny shred of truth in that statement, but with all conservatives, they twist it into something else entirely. Women being given positions of power, being allowed to be more forward-facing, leaders in these far-right movements is something that has been strategically done by men, okay? Because women have always been it's not this new thing that you have women who are sexist and racist and awful, horrible people who ascribe to these awful, horrible ideologies. I mean, there were many women who were part of the KKK. Women forever throughout history have been a part of these very racist ideologues. But the difference is that men were always the faces of these movements, right? And they've realized though that having a woman in a position of power, as a leader or seen as a leader, one, it softens the toxicity, the male toxicity that these movements give off. So it softens that, and it also brings over other women who they see someone just like them, right? They see a woman who is espousing similar beliefs to what they might hold, and they realize like, oh, there's a place for me in this party. There's a place for me in this movement, because there's other women who are doing it. So it's very strategic, and it is smart to use women now as the leaders of these movements, as like influencers, as people who are seen as the faces of these far right groups. And that's why, again, I do not support all women. Some of you bitches are very dumb. I don't realize that far right men don't give a shit. Yeah, I mean, listen, at the end of the day, this is all in service of men, of the patriarchy. And it's unfortunate that just like when you have black far right conservatives, Asian far right conservatives, LGBTQ, you know, like a Blair White, a Milo Yiannopoulos, it is horrible to see women be a part of this and go, well, you are just part of a movement that seeks to deem you as and keep you as inferior to men. Like, at the end of the day, that's what it is, because there is no true equality between men and women when you are on the far right. There's no equality in anything. That's the point. That is the point. The equality between anybody on the right does not exist. It is a movement that seeks to preserve and further the interests of straight white men. I don't know. There's too many. I think there's too many women now who, even if they are not necessarily far right, like they don't adhere to far right ideology or movement, they still have taken this active stance against being labeled as feminist. I think feminist has such a negative label. It's a negative label now. It has a very negative connotation that a lot of people are a lot of women now are trying to say that they are not feminist because feminism has just gotten so out of control. And it just sucks because at the end of the day, like, the literal definition of feminism is the advocacy of women's rights on the basis of the equality of the sexes. It's a movement to end sexism, sexist exploitation and oppression, and achieve full gender equality in law and in practice. And it's just like, I mean, I've had gay friends say disparaging things against feminists and the idea of feminists, and saying that, like, feminists hate men. Feminists are man haters. I'm like, oh my God, Jesus, I have to have this conversation with you too. A lot of Black and other women of color opt out of feminism as well because it's racist past and present. Totally. And I get that. And I think that is legitimate. I think the first time I ever understood why Black women and other women of color don't call themselves feminists was when I heard a Black woman talk about it. And that is exactly what she mentioned. So, like I said, you know, the dictionary definition of feminism, we should all be feminists, but the way that the movement has been run, yes, it absolutely has not been necessarily inclusive. It has not been intersectional. These are all very valid critiques, and it just sucks because when you have women who are not anti-feminist in the sense that they genuinely do not believe in women's equality. So, like this Black woman who I heard talk on why she doesn't say she's a feminist. It sucks when you have people like that, and then that is co-opted by fucking awful, horrible piece of shit women on the right who also say they're not feminists, and they use that as fuel against the idea of feminism and equality. Bunch of extreme feminists fucked the whole thing up for true right. Yes. It's not the first ideology to fall victim to this. Unfortunately, it's always the actions of extremists too that reflect upon the ideological movement as a whole. But in the case of feminism, like, yeah, if you look at early feminism, the women's suffragette movement, et cetera, it was something that was fought for to achieve parity for white women. You know, this is always the issue with progressive movements, is that when you look at the history of them, they tend to exclude people who are not white, whether that is, you know, something like feminism or whatever else that we've talked about. It just always tends to be the pattern. Do whatever makes you happy. Well, in that case, then I would retreat from society and live on a farm with 200 dogs. And it's just me and these dogs. And we all eat dinner together every night. And I sing songs and tell stories to them around a campfire that I have made. That would make me happy.